Have you ever wondered what would happen if one day everything you built, everything you believed in, everything you called your life suddenly disappeared? Not slowly, not gently, but all at once. Would you break? Would you panic? Or would you finally see something you couldn't see before? This is a story about a man who thought he had everything: a stable job, a good income, a clean apartment in a quiet part of the city, a routine that looked perfect from the outside. Every morning, he woke up at 6:30, not because he loved mornings, but because discipline was something he believed in. He would stand in front of the mirror, tie his tie carefully, adjust his collar, and look at himself for a few seconds, not smiling, not frowning, just checking, making sure everything looked right. Because in his world, looking right was important, more important than feeling right. He left his apartment at exactly 7:15. Same shoes, same bag, same path. There was a small coffee shop on the corner of his street. He stopped there every single day. The barista knew his order without asking. Black coffee, no sugar. Always the same. He would take the cup, nod slightly, and walk away. No small talk, no extra words, because conversations felt unnecessary to him, or maybe uncomfortable. At work, he was known as someone reliable, not the most creative, not the most friendly, but dependable. He finished his tasks, met his deadlines, did not complain. And for many years, that was enough. People respected him, or at least that's what he believed. At lunch, he sat alone, not because he had to, but because it felt easier. Easier than explaining himself, easier than pretending to enjoy conversations that meant nothing to him. He liked silence, or he told himself he did. In the evening, he returned home. Same path, same steps. Sometimes he would stop at the supermarket, buy simple food, cook quietly, eat in front of his laptop, watching videos he would forget the next day. Then he slept, and the next day, everything repeated, day after day, week after week, year after year. And strangely, he never questioned it because nothing was wrong, nothing was broken, nothing was missing, or at least nothing obvious. But deep inside, there was something quiet, something small, something he didn't want to look at, a feeling that his life was flat, not painful, not sad, just empty in a way he couldn't explain. But he ignored it because ignoring was easier until one day, everything changed. It didn't start with something big, no accident, no dramatic moment, just a normal morning. He woke up at 6:30, brushed his teeth, dressed the same way, looked at himself in the mirror. But this time, he paused a little longer. Something felt off, not outside, inside, but he couldn't explain it. So he did what he always did. He ignored it. He left the apartment at 7:15, walked to the coffee shop, but when he arrived, the shop was closed. A small sign hung on the door, closed until further notice. He stood there for a few seconds, looking at the door, waiting, as if it might open again, but it didn't. It was a small thing, just coffee, just a shop, but something about it felt unsettling, like a small crack in something familiar. He turned and walked to another cafe, ordered the same coffee, but it didn't taste the same, not because the coffee was bad, but because it wasn't his routine. And that bothered him more than it should. At work, things were also different. People were talking in small groups, whispering, looking serious. He noticed it, but didn't ask. because asking was not his habit. He sat at his desk, turned on his computer, and waited. A few minutes later, an email arrived. Short, direct, unexpected. Mandatory meeting at 9 a.m. No explanation, no details, just a time. He looked at the screen. Something inside him tightened. At 9 o'clock, everyone gathered. The room felt heavy. The manager stood in front, holding a paper. His voice calm, too calm. "There will be changes," he said, and in that moment, without knowing why, he felt it. That quiet feeling inside his chest, growing, becoming clearer, stronger, as if something was about to end and something else was about to begin. But he wasn't ready, not yet, because he still believed he was in control. He still believed his life was stable. He still believed nothing could truly fall apart. But sometimes, life doesn't ask what you believe. It simply shows you the truth. And that day was the beginning of everything he would lose and everything he would finally find. The room was quiet, too quiet. Not the kind of silence he was used to. This one felt heavy, like the air itself was waiting. He sat in the middle row, hands resting on his knees, back straight, eyes forward, just like always. But inside, something had started to move, slowly and uncomfortably. The manager looked at everyone, one by one, as if choosing his words carefully, but also as if there was no gentle way to say what needed to be said. "There will be changes," he repeated, a pause, a long one, then, "due to recent restructuring, some positions will be eliminated." No emotion, no hesitation, just facts. Simple words, but they landed like something heavy dropping into still water. No one spoke, no one moved, but something inside the room shifted, a quiet tension, a shared understanding. He listened carefully, but his mind was no longer fully there. It had already begun to imagine, what if, what if his name was on that list? The thought came quickly, sharply. Then he pushed it away, because that's what he always did. He didn't panic. He didn't react. He controlled, or at least he believed he did. The manager continued, "We appreciate your work. We understand this is difficult. We will provide support." Words, many words, but none of them felt real, because everyone was waiting for one thing: names, and then they came, one by one, calmly, clearly, each name, like a small line drawn across someone's life. Some people lowered their heads, some stared at the floor, some closed their eyes. He stayed still, listening, counting, not consciously, but his mind was tracking. One name, two, three, then his name, just like that. No warning, no pause, just said, and everything inside him stopped. Not exploded, not collapsed, stopped. Like a clock that suddenly no longer moves. He didn't react, didn't look around, didn't breathe differently. From the outside, nothing changed, but inside, something cracked. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. The meeting continued. More words, more explanations. But he didn't hear them anymore, because something else had taken over. A quiet realization. This is happening, not to someone else, not in the future. Now, to him. After the meeting, people slowly stood up. Chairs moved, feet stepped, voices whispered, but he stayed seated for a few seconds longer, looking forward at nothing. Then finally, he stood up, not slowly, not quickly, just automatically, as if his body knew what to do better than his mind. He walked back to his desk. Same steps, same path. But everything felt different. His desk looked the same: computer, papers, a pen placed neatly on the right side. Everything was exactly where it always was, and yet none of it belonged to him anymore. He sat down, opened a drawer, closed it again. He didn't know what to take, what mattered, what didn't, because suddenly everything felt temporary. A colleague walked by, stopped, looked at him. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He nodded. "Thank you." Simple, polite, controlled, just like always. But inside, he felt something strange. Not anger, not sadness, something else, something empty. As if a part of him had already stepped away. He packed slowly, not because he needed time, but because he didn't know what else to do. One item, then another. Then he stopped, his hands resting on the edge of the desk. And for the first time, a question appeared. Who am I? Without this. The question was quiet, but powerful, and he had no answer, because for years, this job had been part of him. Not just something he did, but something he was. Reliable, stable, predictable. And now, that part was gone, just like that. He closed the box, stood up, looked around one last time, not with emotion, but with awareness. This place was no longer his, and maybe it never truly was. He walked out of the building. Same door, same steps, but this time, no destination, no plan, no next task, just space. Outside, the city moved as usual. Cars passed, people walked, voices filled the air. Nothing had changed, except everything had. He stood on the sidewalk, holding the small box, and for a moment, he didn't move, because he realized something. For the first time in many years, he had nowhere to be, no schedule, no structure, no routine telling him what to do next. And instead of feeling free, he felt lost, deeply, quietly, lost. He started walking, not toward home, not toward anywhere specific, just walking, his steps slower than usual, not controlled, not planned, just natural. He passed the coffee shop that had been closed that morning, still closed, the sign still there, closed until further notice. He looked at it again, and this time, it meant something different. Not just a shop, but a message. Something familiar can disappear without warning. And when it does, you are left with yourself, only yourself. He continued walking. The city felt louder now. Or maybe he was finally hearing it, without the filter of routine, without the noise of structure, just life, raw, uncontrolled, unpredictable. He reached a small park, not one he usually visited. In fact, he wasn't sure he had ever been there before. He walked inside, slowly, as if entering something unknown. There were benches, trees, a few people sitting quietly. He chose a bench, sat down, placed the box beside him, and for the first time, he didn't check the time, didn't think about what came next, didn't try to fix anything. He just sat. And in that silence, something began to rise. Not panic, not fear, something deeper, a realization. If for years he had been moving, doing, completing, but he had never really stopped to ask himself, why? Why this job? Why this life? Why this routine? And now, without all of it, the questions had nowhere to hide. They were here, clear, present, waiting. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a slow breath, then another. And for the first time, he didn't try to control what he felt, he allowed it. The confusion, the emptiness, the uncertainty, all of it. Because now, there was nothing left to protect him from it. And maybe that was not the end. Maybe that was the beginning. But he didn't know that yet. All he knew was this: he had lost something he thought he needed, and now he was standing at the edge of something unknown, something uncomfortable, something real. And whether he liked it or not, he would have to face it, because this time there was no routine to hide behind, no structure to hold him, no role to define him, just him, alone, quiet, and finally, awake. He sat there longer than he expected, not because he had nowhere to go, but because, for the first time, he didn't feel the need to go anywhere. The bench was simple, old wood, slightly uneven, a little cold, but it held him in a way nothing else had for a long time. The box beside him felt heavier now, not because of what were inside, but because of what it meant: a closed chapter, a finished identity, a version of himself that no longer existed. He looked at his hands, still, quiet. For years, these hands had followed instructions, typed emails, completed tasks, built something. That now was gone. He slowly opened the box, not with urgency, but with curiosity. Inside, there were only a few things: a notebook, a pen, a small photo. He picked up the photo, looked at it carefully. It was old, slightly faded, a younger version of himself, standing with two other people, smiling genuinely, not the polite, controlled smile he had now, a real one. He stared at it, trying to remember, when was the last time he smiled like that? The answer did not come easily, because it had been too long. He turned the photo over. A date was written on the back: 10 years ago, 10 years. He leaned back against the bench. Let the number sink in. 10 years of routine, 10 years of stability, 10 years of quiet distance from himself. He placed the photo back into the box, then picked up the notebook, opened it. Most pages were empty, clean, unused, waiting. He flipped through slowly, page after page, blank, and something about that felt uncomfortable because it reminded him of something: opportunity, possibility. And those were things he had stopped thinking about a long time ago, because possibility requires risk, and he had chosen safety, always safety. He closed the notebook, placed it on his lap, and stared ahead, at the trees, at the sky, at nothing in particular. And then a thought appeared, simple, quiet, but impossible to ignore. What now? The question stayed, did not disappear, did not fade. It sat there, waiting. And for the first time, he did not push it away. He let it stay. He let it exist. Because now, he had no answer to replace it. A breeze moved through the park. Soft, gentle. He felt it on his face, on his hands, and it reminded him he was here. Not in the past, not in the routine. Here, now. A child ran past him, laughing, loud, free, uncontrolled. The sound felt unfamiliar, not because he had never heard laughter, but because he had not paid attention to it in a long time. The child's parent followed, smiling, calling his name. There was warmth in that moment, connection, something alive. He watched them disappear down the path, and a quiet realization began to form. Life was still happening, around him, without him. And maybe it always had. He just hadn't noticed, because he was too busy, living inside a structure that kept everything predictable, safe, but also limited. He took a deep breath, and then another, and slowly, He stood up, not because he had a plan, but because staying still was no longer enough. He picked up the box, held it in both hands, then started walking, this time with a little more awareness. He noticed the ground under his feet, the sound of his steps, the movement of air, things that had always been there, but never fully experienced. He left the park, returned to the street, but now the city felt different, not louder, not faster, just clearer, as if something inside him had become more open, more aware. He walked without direction, turned corners without thinking, followed streets he had never taken before. And strangely, he didn't feel lost anymore. Because now, being lost was honest. It matched his reality. And that felt better than pretending to know where he was going. After some time, he found himself standing in front of a small store, old, quiet, with a simple sign above the door, books. He looked at it for a moment. Then he stepped inside. The air was different, still, calm, the smell of paper and time. There were shelves everywhere, filled with stories, ideas, lives he had never explored. A woman stood behind the counter. She looked up as he entered, gave a small nod. No words, no pressure, just acknowledgement. He nodded back, then walked slowly between the shelves, running his fingers lightly over the spines of books, names he didn't recognize, titles he had never read, because for years, he had told himself he didn't have time. But maybe that wasn't true. Maybe he just didn't make space. He stopped at one shelf, pulled out a book, opened it, read a few lines, slowly, carefully, as if remembering how to read for meaning, not for information. He didn't rush, didn't skip, just read. And something inside him softened, because the words were not asking anything from him. They were simply there, offering, not demanding. He closed the book, held it in his hands, then looked around at all the other books, all the other possibilities. And for a moment, he felt something new, not excitement, not happiness, but curiosity, a quiet, gentle curiosity, the kind that doesn't push, the kind that invites. He walked to the counter, placed the book down. "I'll take this," he said, his voice slightly different, less controlled, more present. The woman nodded, rang it up, handed it back to him. No unnecessary words, just a simple exchange. But somehow, it felt meaningful. He stepped outside again, holding the book, the box in his other hand, and for the first time that day, he didn't feel empty, not completely. There was still uncertainty, still confusion, still questions. But now, there was also something else. A small space, a space where something new could begin. He didn't know what that was. He didn't know where it would lead. But for the first time, he didn't need to know. Because maybe finding himself was not about having answers. Maybe it was about learning how to stay with the questions. And slowly, very slowly, he was beginning to understand how to do that. That evening, he did not turn on his laptop. That alone felt unfamiliar. For years, his evenings had been filled with quiet distractions, videos, emails, random information that passed through his mind without leaving anything behind. But tonight, he placed the laptop aside, closed, silent, and instead, he sat at the small table near his window. And the book in front of him, the box beside him, the room, still, there was no urgency, no schedule, no voice inside him telling him what he should do next. Only a quiet question. What do you choose? He looked at the book, ran his fingers over the cover, then slowly opened it. The first page, simple, clean. The words, not complicated, but something about them felt different tonight because he was not reading to finish, not reading to achieve something. He was reading to feel, to understand, to be present. He read one sentence, then paused, not because he had to, but because he wanted to stay with it, to let it settle, to let it mean something. This was new, so slower than he was used to, but somehow it felt right. Time passed, but he didn't check. He didn't measure, because for the first time, time did not control him. He closed the book after a few pages, not because he was tired, but because it was enough. That word, enough. It had not been part of his life for a long time. There was always more to do, more to achieve, more to maintain. But now, for this moment, this was enough. He leaned back in his chair, looked around his apartment. Same walls, same furniture, same quiet space. But something had changed, not outside, inside. He noticed things he had never really seen before. The way the light fell across the floor, the slight sound of the window moving in the wind, the small imperfections in the table, details, simple things. But now, they were visible because he was finally paying attention. He stood up, walked to the window, looked outside. The city was glowing with evening lights, cars moving, people walking, life continuing. And for the first time, he did not feel separate from it. He felt part of it, quietly, without needing to prove anything. He stayed there for a while. Then, he turned back, his eyes resting on the box, still there, still waiting. He walked toward it, opened it again, the same items, the notebook, the pen, the photo. But now, they felt different. Not like reminders of what he had lost, but like pieces of something he had not finished yet. He picked up the notebook, opened to the first page, blank, still blank. But now, it didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt inviting. He picked up the pen, held it in his hand, paused, because writing was not something he was used to. Not like this. Not without a purpose, not without a task. But this time, there was no rule, no expectation, only a question. What do you want to say? He stared at the page for a long moment. Then, slowly, he wrote, not a full sentence, just a few words. I don't know who I am. He stopped, looked at the words, felt something shift inside him. Because this was honest, more honest than anything he had said in years. He didn't try to fix it, didn't try to make it sound better. He just let it be there. Then he wrote again, I want to find out. Another pause, another breath. And in that moment, something changed. Not dramatically, not completely, but enough. Because now, he was no longer just reacting to what he had lost. He was beginning to move towards something, even if he didn't know what it was yet. He closed the notebook, placed it gently on the table, then sat down again. His body felt lighter, not because his problems were gone, but because he was no longer running from them. He was facing them, quietly, slowly, honestly. The next morning, he woke up. No alarm, no rush, just naturally. The light coming through the window, soft, warm. He stayed in bed for a few seconds, not checking the time, not planning the day, just being there. And for the first time, he noticed something. His body, the way it felt, the way it rested, the way it breathed. Simple things, but real. He got up, walked to the kitchen, made coffee, different from before, slower, more aware. He stood there, holding the cup, not drinking immediately, just feeling the warmth, smelling it, being present with it. Then a small thought came. He smiled, slightly, because for years, coffee had been part of his routine, automatic, unnoticed. But now, it was something else, a moment, a choice. He sat down, opened the notebook again, looked at the words he had written. I don't know who I am. I want to find out. He read them slowly. Then, he added one more line. I will not rush. He underlined it, gently, because this time, he understood something important. Finding himself was not something he could complete, not something he could control. It was something he had to experience, step by step, moment by moment, without forcing it, without pretending, just living it. He closed the notebook, finished his coffee, then stood up, and for the first time in many years, he did not follow a routine. He followed a feeling, a quiet direction inside him, not loud, not clear, but real. And that was enough to take the next step. Days passed, but they did not feel like the days before. They were not identical. They did not repeat in the same predictable way. Each morning felt slightly different, not because something big was happening, but because he was finally present to notice it. He began to walk more, not with a destination, not with a goal, just walking. Through streets he had never taken, past buildings he had never looked at closely, into small spaces he had never given himself permission to enter. And every time, he discovered something, not always something important, sometimes just a small detail, a quiet cafe with only 2 tables, a narrow alley filled with soft light in the afternoon, a tree growing between 2 buildings, somehow surviving. And each of these moments left something inside him, a feeling, a reminder that life was not only about structure, not only about stability, but also about experience, about noticing, about being there. He returned to the bookstore again, not because he needed a book, but because he liked the feeling, the stillness, the quiet presence. The woman behind the counter recognized him. This time, she smiled, a small smile, but real. He nodded. Then, after a moment of hesitation, he spoke. Do you have any recommendations? The question felt simple, but for him, it was not, because it meant opening a small door, allowing interaction, allowing connection. She looked at him, not surprised, not rushed, then walked toward a shelf, picked up a book, held it out to him. This one, she said. He took it, looked at the cover, then at her. Thank you. And this time, he meant it, not as a polite habit, but as a real expression. He bought the book, walked out again, and something inside him felt warmer, because connection, even small, changes something. He continued writing in the notebook, not every day, not perfectly, but honestly, some days, only one sentence. Some days, nothing at all. But he did not judge himself. He did not force consistency, because he was learning. That growth does not follow rules. It follows truth. One afternoon, he returned to the same park, the same bench, the place where everything had begun to shift. He sat down, placed the notebook beside him, looked around, the same trees, the same quiet paths. But this time, he was different. He was not sitting there because he was lost. He was sitting there because he chose to be. And that made all the difference. He closed his eyes, took a slow breath, then another. And in that moment, he realized something. He had spent years trying to build a life that looked stable, safe, controlled, but in doing so, he had slowly moved away from himself, from what he felt, from what he needed, from what was real, and losing everything had forced him to return, not in a dramatic way, not in a perfect way, but in an honest way. Step by step, breath by breath, moment by moment, he opened his eyes, looked at his hands again, the same hands. But now, they felt different. Not tools, not instruments for tasks, but part of him. Alive, present, connected. He picked up the notebook, opened to a new page, and wrote, slowly, carefully. I thought losing everything would break me. He paused, and then continued, but it showed me what was never truly mine. Another pause, a deeper breath, and what has always been waiting for me to notice. He looked at the words, felt them, let them settle, because now he understood something he had never understood before. You do not find yourself by building a perfect life. You find yourself when the life you built falls apart and you choose to stay, to look, to feel, to begin again, not as who you were told to be, not as who you tried to become, but as who you are, when nothing is left to hide behind. The sun began to lower, soft light moving through the trees, the air calm. He sat there, not thinking about the future, not worrying about what comes next, because now he trusted something new, not certainty, not control, but himself, his ability to face what comes, his willingness to stay present, his courage to not run away. And that was enough, more than enough. He stood up slowly, picked up the notebook, held it close for a moment, then began to walk, not back to the old life, not toward a fixed destination, but forward, with awareness, with honesty, with a quiet strength that did not need to prove itself. And as he walked, he realized something simple. He had not found all the answers. He had not solved everything, but he had found something more important, a way of being, a way of living, a way of returning to himself again and again. And maybe that is what it truly means to find yourself, not once, but every day, in every choice, in every moment you decide to be real, to be present, to be you. If this story made you pause, if it made you reflect, even for a moment, then take that moment with you. Let it stay. Let it grow. And if you want more slow, meaningful stories to help you learn English and reconnect with yourself, subscribe to the channel and come back for the next journey, because sometimes the quietest stories are the ones that change us the most.